Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Communion with the Gods. I'm your host, Perry King. Today, we'll be discussing Celtic theology, and we'll start by talking about the Celtic triple goddesses. I'd like to welcome a famous expert to tell us more about this interesting form of divinity.
Hello there, Perry. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. How have you been lately?
Oh, pretty well. I was just awarded a Pulitzer Prize for my last book on the origins of the King Arthur myth, so, you know. And how are you?
Oh, I'm doing fine too, although I'm still waiting on that Pulitzer. Now, why don't you tell our audience a little about yourself?
Well, I hold degrees in several fields, primarily archaeology. I graduated from Yale, Cambridge, and Oxford within the course of 6 years, and quickly found employment with institutions involved in excavating Celtic sites. Having worked for several government groups and written several books, I now spend my time researching the ancient Celtic sites in the area and reporting my findings to the New Society for the Perpetuation of Our Way of Life, or N.S. Powell. N.S. Powell seeks to expose the motives of young Druidic revival groups for what they truly are, and prevent any alterations in the law regarding these areas and the surrounding land. Excuse me, I'm mixing up my radio shows now.
Now, some of our listeners may not be very familiar with the concept of the triple goddess. Do you think you could give us a brief explanation of what they are and what their role in Celtic theology is, Mr. Expert?
Well, the idea of the triple goddess has been around for a long time, and not only among the Celts. Examples of gods and goddesses in triple form can be found all over the world, from the Greek Fates to the Indian goddess Sarasvati. In Celtic mythology, too, both gods and goddesses could be found in triple form. Essentially, a triple deity is either a set of three interrelated deities, or a deity with three aspects, generally the latter in Celtic mythology. Triadic groups of deities were essentially ways of summarizing knowledge and the different aspects of the supernatural. One example of triple goddesses in Celtic mythology is the Gaulish matronae, which flourished among the late Gaulish Celts throughout much of present-day France, and were later incorporated into the Roman pantheon when a Gallo-Roman culture soon emerged after the Roman conquest. While French philologist Georges Dumézil believed the three phases represented different social classes, Robert Graves summarized them as maiden, mother, and crone. The maiden represents youth and new beginnings and serves as a muse for creativity and inspiration. The mother symbolizes sexuality and fertility, while the crone represents wisdom and death. However,
now,
recently...
as you know, we have a limited amount of time on this program, and I'd like to be able to...
Recently, this summary has come into question, and rightly so, since these roles have been greatly distorted by modern neo-pagans into a tool for the advancement of their own political agenda. They were turned into misandric, violent figures, which should offend women as much as it should men. And now, the triple goddess is a symbol for the occult, with triple goddess tarot cards and all kinds of other occultic objects. But in any case, even the original triple goddesses of Celtic mythology were scary figures, certainly not warm and maternal like the Venus of Willendorf, and probably the product of primitive Celtic reaction to the unexplainable in nature.
Now it's time to bring out a particularly special guest of the day, a triple goddess herself, the Morrigan. Looking beautiful as ever in her maiden form, I see. So, Morrigan, how do you feel about being called scary and a product of the primitive Celtic mind?
Well, I have to admit, I am kind of scary sometimes. But seriously, I don't think there's anything very scary about me. I mean, sure, maybe as the goddess of prophecy and war, I may be a little destructive, but that's nothing to be afraid of. After all, death is necessary for rebirth and the continuation of life. Anyway, my aspects are Beth, Macha, and the Man. Beth is a war goddess who takes the form of a crow, Macha is associated with horses and sovereignty, and Naman is the spirit of the destructive havoc surrounding war. Together, these forms constitute me. It is true that many gods are typificated in addition to goddesses. For example, Teutates, Asus, and Tyrannus, who are similar to the Roman Mars and Jupiter, represented war and cruelty as well as fertility and protection. The Romans claimed that each one was associated with a different type of human sacrifice, but the Romans were also known for exaggeration, and having known three of them personally, I found them to be decent people. In any case, it's worth noting that many different gods were found in triple form, and that many gods were also associated with specific natural landmarks. And I personally don't believe that my being a triple goddess has anything to do with advancing a political agenda, but feel free to prove me wrong on that.
Our goddess and famous expert will now be leaving for a quick break. In the meantime, please welcome Sheela Nagig. Sheela?
Miss Nagig, please. Where am I?
Why, you're in the Humanities Radio 1 studios. Are you feeling alright, Ms. Nagig?
Oh yes, I'm perfectly alright. It's just that I'm not really sure of everything all the time. It really goes back to what I am, essentially. No one's quite sure whether I'm Celtic or medieval. I would go with the former, though. At least, that's what I tell myself.
Well, what can you tell us that you know for sure?
Most of the bas-relief engravings of me are in Britain and Ireland. Some are in regions that were never even conquered by the Anglo-Saxons. The engravers chose really quite rude ways to show me, too. I'm hunkered down, exposing myself to the world on those walls. But I suppose they had a reason to do it.
And what do you think that's all about?
Well, I suppose it's all about fertility, isn't it? It's not as though the Celts didn't have plenty to do with fertility anyway. On Beltane, the Irish festival marking the beginning of the pastoral summer, they would round up all their cattle and lead them through giant bonfires as a way of promoting success in years to come. It doesn't rightfully make any sense to me, but hey, how can I complain? They've immortalized me by sticking me on walls all over the place.
Ms. Nagig, do you mind telling us about the nature of your name?
Just another thing I'm confused about, I'm afraid. It really does seem to have risen out of nowhere. There were some British sailors doing a dance they called the Sheela Nagig, but I don't have much to do with anything like that. Some people think that it came from the Irish Sichlin Actior, meaning the old hag of the breasts. I don't personally have much of an opinion at all, really. It's just what people call me. There's no easy way to get them to stop. I might as well enjoy it.
People have come up with a host of different explanations about you, no?
Quite right. It's rather odd, really, and I wish they would make up their minds, because I don't know what to believe anymore. Some people think I'm a medieval figure depicting the corruption of female lust, but a lot of people also believe that I'm a form of a Celtic goddess that survived in the wall carvings. They say that I'm a lustful old hag of some triple goddess, bearing my vulva, trying to draw men in. The one man who submitted to her will would behold her transform into a beautiful maiden, and he would become wealthy and fortunate in rule.
And that's of particular significance, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It deals with the very important idea of the triple form of life, with the final stages being the true beginning. The man would meet with the goddess in her final form, as a hag, but as they were together she would complete the cycle and become once again beautiful and young.
What are other ideas people have come up with about you?
Modern scholars are very fond of the idea that I deal with fertility. I am, after all, showing off a pretty fertile part of my body, you know, so it's a logical assumption. They think that stones bearing my image would have been used in marriage ceremonies or during labor.
And do you think that worked?
Well, I'm still around, aren't I? They certainly thought it did in any case, and maybe that's all it takes.
Fascinating. Thank you for your time, Ms. Nagig.
Oh no, thank you.
Now that the Morrigan and our famous expert have returned, we can continue the discussion we were having earlier. I'd like to know both of your opinions on the practice of Celtic headhunting. What do you think of it, and how does it reflect on Celtic culture?
Just so our listeners know what we're talking about, headhunting is the practice of ritually decapitating enemies and keeping their heads as trophies of war to flaunt one's virility. The Celts thought that the head contained the life force of a person, and that this force could be captured by keeping the head. I personally think this practice is barbaric, and proves how violent the Celts were as a culture.
But headhunting was practiced by many cultures all around the world, though, correct?
Yes, and that only further reinforces my point. I don't know how Leotard could even talk of incredulity toward meta.
May I say something? If you're looking for an explanation of this headhunting phenomenon, don't look at me. Headhunting was primarily practiced in the early Iron Age Britain and the Hallstatt and Latin cultures in Gaul, which existed around 700 to 200 BCE. I'm an Irish goddess, and I refuse to be associated with those crazy Gauls. Still, while it is true that some Celts did practice headhunting, the reports of the brutality involved were greatly exaggerated by biased Roman sources such as Diodorus Siculus. The archaeological evidence for extreme brutality during headhunting is limited at best, based on speculation over a few remains found in Salisbury and Gloucestershire. So I don't think everything our famous expert here said was completely true.
And famous expert, how do you respond to that?
Well, I don't know what she's talking about. I've spent decades researching this. My PhD research was on this. I think I know all about the archaeological evidence for headhunting.
I don't think our listeners should have to listen to the ranting of this overeducated snob. Are you going to trust some moral historian or a goddess? In any case, there are much more important topics in Celtic theology than headhunting. What about nature veneration, or our extensive, and may I say, rather impressive pantheon? Aren't those topics more worthy of discussion?
Can you please shut up and stop trying to change the topic?
Please, try to keep this civil. I mean, I can see you both have very strong opinions on this topic, but I'd appreciate if we could have an open and friendly discussion. Now, Morgan, I'd really like to know your opinion on the fusion of Roman and local Gaulish gods. Julius Caesar wrote that, of the gods they worship Mercury most of all, which illustrates the extent to which...
Look, I don't think I can continue this. I'm trying to present the facts about Celtic mythology and its implications on modern society, and the stupid barbarian woman keeps spouting her occultic BS. What am I supposed to do?
Why, first you call me a myth, and then you call me barbaric? I'm not going to take this from a pompous, over-academic expert. I'm a goddess.
Just calm down, please. We're still on the air. Okay, we will now interrupt the show for... Oh my god, what the heck is that? Oh my god, is he alright? Call an ambulance. Thank you for watching this week's Communion with the Gods. Tune in next week for an interview with Osiris, Egyptian king of the dead, and his opinion on allegations of corruption in the judging of souls. Hear from those who feel their cause were wrongly consumed. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.
My pancreas!